Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Stand Up Speakeasy. My name is Srethne, and every single episode of the Stand Up Speakeasy, I bring on a comic and we talk about their careers and we build up their social media following so that way when this whole thing's all over, they got a lot of followers and stuff on Instagram and Twitter, and they can get some really cool spots at comic clubs and whatnot. And we're also raising funds for their favorite charities and nonprofit organizations as well. So for this episode, we're raising funds for my hood, my block, my city. And Michael, I'm helping him out, building up his social media presence with Instagram and Twitter. So follow him at comic underscore M underscore Cooper. And you'll see all that information on the bottom below. So without further ado, jumping into the room here is Michael Cooper. Hi, Michael. How are you? Your mic's off. There you are.
Thanks for having me on. This is exciting.
You're welcome. Thank you for being my guest. It means a lot to me. So I'm looking forward to jumping into your comedy career so far. So, so, um, so Mike, you've been performing stand-up comedy in Chicago for a long time now, 5 years. What has been like before the whole pandemic and all that stuff?
Could you repeat that one time? Sorry.
Oh yeah, you've been performing stand-up comedy in Chicago for about 5 years now, and what's it like out there and before the whole pandemic?
Yeah, sure. So before the pandemic, it's great. It's a great town to do stand up in, and I'm sure it's still going to be a great town after. I mean, it's the sort of town like you can hit 3 mics every night. There's no, and this isn't to disparage any other comedy communities that do this, but there's none of that like pay to play stuff here. That's kind of against the rules. Like I think there's one club that I think has a 2-drink minimum at their open mic, and there was one like bar restaurant that tried to have a 1-drink minimum, and everyone hated it. But you can hit 3 to 4 mics every night. Always plenty of other comics to learn from, and yeah, it's a really great town for it. So there's a shit ton of showcases and stuff. Is this do I have to follow FCC
Nope.
stuff on this? Okay, cool.
Yeah, you can cuss if you want to.
I forgot to ask. Although I do feel like I have the sort of reputation where if that was the case when you interviewed David, he would be like, you should probably tell him not to say these things.
Yep, you're totally fine. George Carlin will forgive you, and I'll forgive you too.
But yeah, and just a lot of really, when I first started out, I was really kind of lucky, I think, because I was a little bit older than most people are when they first start out. I was 28. And so that gave me the presence of mind to like not get mad about, getting bumped at open mics, oh, I've been doing this for 90 days. I'm going to get mad because I first have to watch somebody who's been doing it for 5 years. Like, what was that? But I noticed like a lot of like the younger folks who started out at the same time as me, would get like mad about stuff like that. But it's a really great comedy community. There's always a space on any night of the week. Like I won't say to myself even, it's Sunday or tomorrow's Sunday, so I need to make plans to be here, and here. It'll be, Sunday at 2:00 in the afternoon. I'll say, hey, I want to hit mics today. And then I'll, kind of remember that's how many mics there are. It's just, it got hard to keep them straight.
Wow.
Same thing with the showcases. There's just a bunch of them.
That's incredible. That's like my dream land there, and it's just awesome to hear. And I'm so glad that they don't do the pay to play and the minimum drinks and stuff anymore. And out of the 5 years that we've done it, what are some of your favorite memories and your favorite venues and stuff and showcases to perform on?
So there's a really fun show here in Chicago that it's on hiatus right now due to the pandemic. I pray that they bring it back afterwards, but it was actually my very first one was a show called Cupcake Comedy Cabaret. It's at this place called called Gallery Cabaret, and it's one of those shows. They have an open mic beforehand. They'll book a lot from their open mic, so it's you know very much a meritocracy in that regard. And it's just very well run, and they do a really good job of combining on that showcase. They do a very good job of combining very experienced comics with newer comics. So if you're, I was, I think 3 or 4 months in, and I got to do an opening slot on that show, and the person headlining it is a very, well-known, very highly respected comedian locally who had been around for, I don't know, 10 years by then. So those kind of experiences are, I think invaluable, especially when you first start out. So I think that's one of my favorite ones.
Awesome. Great stuff. And you're originally from Alabama. And what was it like growing up in Alabama?
Different than what I imagine it would be like growing up in Chicago. I mean, so the town I'm from is right next to Gulf Shores, Alabama. So it's 45 minutes north of the Gulf of Mexico. So, there was always, something that you could do on a weekend, which is, go down to the beach when you're a teenager. Honestly, the area got a little touristy for my taste, but I still, it's still like where I'm from, and I still very much love everybody down there. I didn't really fit in per se. These are folks who, these are the type of folks that shoot guns into the air on New Year's Eve,
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely different, definitely, a kind of slow pace, very, very much the sort of place where you, this particular town, very much the sort of place where you grow up there, you marry someone you went to high school with, you get yourself a job, you have kids, buy a house. That's kind of it. It's a kind of a prescriptive environment. So it's a great place, but it's not. The idea of doing stand up down there would have been absurd. Also terrifying. Like, I don't want to go up in front of these people and try to make them laugh. Like, I fuck around too much for that. I end up getting my ass kicked that way.
Indeed. Oh man, it reminds me of like my hometown in Colorado. It's just like, man, they're more accepting of my dirty material here in Daytona Beach than they are there, and it's just I can be weird and goofy and go all off the rails. So I totally get it.
Now, to give you an example of the type of place I'm from, and this was one of my this is a true thing, but it was also something that was in one of my very early bits that kind of not the best bit. I had to throw it out, but there's a place down there, a tourist attraction called Alligator Alley, and my brother actually worked there, and his job was to follow the folks around who were, trying to maintain the grounds, like pushing lawnmowers, things like that. And his job was basically to watch out for the alligators for them. And if the alligators got too close, he'd hit the alligator in the face with a stick. And that's a job down there. That's an actual job down there.
Oh man.
I love the place. It's fucking ape shit. I love the place. I didn't really fit in, but I love the shit out of the place. Just watching grown men get into fights over a game of pool because Obama or whatever shit they had going on that day. It's a very special place, and I don't mean to disparage it at all. It's just a different type of town.
Indeed, most definitely. And you've performed in a bunch of showcases and clubs throughout the region. And what are some of your favorite places outside of Chicago, like outside the region or in the region there, that you've performed at?
So I haven't done a lot of stuff, kind of on the road yet. That's one of the things I'm doing after the pandemic. Because I wanted to wait till I'd grown to a certain point, and luckily I think through being able to continue to work material through virtual mics and virtual shows. Luckily, I think I've reached that point now. But Comedy Shrine is out in, I believe, Aurora, which is that's still Chicagoland. Around town, there's this. There were these showcases that come out of this spot called Shakers on Clark Street. It's this really cool. I think it's a gay bar, but to be honest, I don't really know for sure. I know it's very LGBT friendly, but and the spot I mentioned earlier, Gallery Cabaret, they have a lot of different types of showcases there. North Bar here in Chicago is kind of home base for a lot of comics. So those are some of the venues that I really have spent a lot of time in and really enjoy. And a lot of those are independent shows. You'll notice there weren't a lot of clubs on that list. I really like the independent shows and kind of being in a slightly different environment than the clubs.
Indeed, most definitely. You've also performed at Flappers Comedy Club too in Burbank, and what was that like?
Yeah, so I've done some virtual shows with them, and it is incredible. It's the coolest damn thing. I get to perform for a club in California without leaving my apartment at all. I got to do a show there with folks who work for Conan O'Brien, with folks that have like a bunch of TV credits and things like that. That spot has been very, very kind to me, and I really think they've set a very good example throughout this pandemic of how to keep hope alive and keep comedy alive, and make lemonade out of lemons, because they're taking full advantage and bringing in comics from all over the country, and those comics are getting to work with folks that they there's it crazy that I got to do a show where Laurie Kilmartin was on that show. That's insane. I also bombed for 5 minutes in front of Laurie Kilmartin and Brian Kiley, both of whom I believe work on Conan. And so yeah, that place has been really, really, really good to me. They also run open mics every night of the week. They are based in California, and I think the kind of paying $5 for stage time there is like standard. But they have an option to not have to do that. So that's, voluntary. If you do their open mics, you can donate $5 to them or don't. But they've been really, really cool to me, and I think to a lot of comics throughout this pandemic. And I'm looking forward to, once this pandemic's over, I'm like, come on, let me let me get to the actual place. The club itself as a physical location is it's kind of a myth to me, right? Like, I haven't seen it. Same as Drop Comedy Club out in South Bend, Indiana, which I think they're moving locations. But they were doing an open mic every week virtually throughout this entire pandemic, and it really that's been very meaningful to me, those two venues doing that, because it's one thing to have these cool independent open mics that are great, and a lot of work gets done there, but I think for me, seeing clubs doing the same thing is gives it a certain It makes me really think that the folks who are running those spots are really cool people.
Indeed, most definitely. And we were talking about like how we discovered our voices in stand up. Like I'm like the cleanest, dirtiest comic in Daytona Beach is the name they gave me. And your work, your materials, presumptions about American culture and targeted ways. And how did you find your voice in that department?
I live in Chicago and sound like this. So, you know, the moment I get up on the stage, in a place like Chicago, there's some tension kind of already built in there, because I do have a thick drawl. Maybe not as thick now as it was when I first started stand up, just because I've been living in Chicago longer. But I'd always kind of wanted to do social commentary stuff anyway. That was always my plan with stand up. And I think the way I arrived at this idea of just attacking presumptions about American culture is, I looked around Chicago and I looked at where I was from, and I realized that the difference was one place thought it was better. Like one place thought it was had a level of moral superiority that it didn't really earn. And so I started, kind of dissecting that. That was my first real bit that I'm still not embarrassed of. Was making fun of white Chicagoans who believed that their town was great and that Southern towns were backwards and bigoted. Not that Southern towns aren't backward and bigoted, but that their town, Chicago, isn't great. So just kind of, I really love to find hypocrisy and expose hypocrisy, and do it in a way that, do it in a way that is going to make people laugh, number one. But it's also like, if you're one of those hypocrites, you're just going to have to go, up. Fair enough. It'd be like telling me I need a haircut, like, it's like, yeah, I do. I need a haircut. All there is to it. I know. You can't get mad at that person. Some folks still did every now and then, but yeah, I think that was a big part of it. Was I really have deep-seated hatred for hypocrisy and for bullying. And I just immediately, when I first started stand-up, because again, I was a little bit older. How old were you when you first started, if I may ask?
I was 30 years old.
Okay, so you might have a similar experience where you already kind of know yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's all these 22-year-olds who are telling you what to do.
Indeed.
And they're well-meaning and smart and funny. And hey, a lot of them are doing, probably would have done well to listen to some of them's advice. A lot of them are doing, much better than me, as far as, the size of the platforms they're on, and the amount of stage time they get in larger venues. But for me, I was just very much dead set. The advice I got a lot of was, oh, well, you don't want to do social or political commentary early on in comedy because you don't know if you're funny yet or not. And I was like, I am 28 and I smoke a pack a day, and I'm a alcoholic who is sometimes in recovery. I don't have time to spend 5 years getting good at knock-knock jokes in hopes that that'll prepare me to be good at social and political commentary jokes, or social and political humor. So I was just like, no, I'm gonna dive straight into it. I would take a topic and I would go from there. I would be like racism, and then I would go from there. Or I'd be like sexism, and then I'd go from there with 3 or 4 minutes of material. It was a really absurd way to get started, but yeah.
Awesome. And I'm glad we both found our voices in stand up, and and when they heard when I talk, it's like, hearing like a 12-year-old on stage saying really bad things. And so like it makes everyone look at me and like, just laugh along. It's like there's nowhere else, and that's why I really get heckled, because it's like we want to hear what this kid has to say or this guy has to say. It's like it's gonna be a great night. It's like, I promise. So Mike, I was hoping to go on tour and ask you these questions in person. And with that being said, Mike, what inspired you to perform stand-up comedy?
You know, I was working for Uber at the time, and I had noticed that if I made customers laugh, they'd give me they'd tip me a little bit more. Uh, and then there's this bar here in Chicago called Chicago's Blarney Stone, and I had used to work there. I would work at the door and just during special events because they were a pretty low volume place. But I had stopped working there, and when I was doing Uber, I would still go there and because I could park my car there. I had tickets, and they were going to boot my car if I parked it on the street. So I'd park my car there, and then go in and have something to eat, and shoot a couple games of pool, kind of on my lunch break from Uber. And I was up there one Thursday night. I said to the bartender, Tommy, who are these fucking people? And he said, it's open mic comedy night. And I was like, of course, that's the group of people that would hang out in here. And he told me I should go up. And I was like, fuck you, Tommy, because I thought he was making fun of me. But then I ended up just doing it. I did it just on the spot. And it was probably pretty bad. But I did get a couple of laughs. And from there, I was like, okay, this is my thing now. Like, this is my new creative outlet.
Absolutely.
What about yourself, if I may ask? I know.
Oh, well, I used to work in the horror industry in California when I lived out there.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and I was the apprentice to one of the masters of horror, if you will, and his name is Clive Barker, and he's known for Candyman and stuff in Chicago.
What
and,
the fuck?
Yeah, and like he told
Clive Barker.
Yep, I was his apprentice for 4 years out there, and he goes. I would tell him all these funny stories, like from my adventures in LA, because I was a concert journalist as well when I was out there. And just random on my days off or whenever I left the studio or whatever. And he goes, have you ever tried doing stand-up? And I'm like, no, I've never tried it. And he goes, well, promise me that before you leave, you'll take people that work here and to go see you. And I did it at a coffee shop, and I was so nervous that I dressed up as my superhero alter ego, Wu Manchu, which is inspired by the Wu-Tang Clan. And I did my 5 minutes, and I took off my clothes, and I put on a Rage Against the Machine shirt that I got from their concert in LA. And then I walked back in, and the host was like, hey, do you have 5 more minutes of stand up? And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm the superheroes manager. and he goes, you're pulling an Andy Kaufman on me, aren't you? And I'm like, yeah, I'm pulling an Andy Kaufman on you. But other than that, and then after that, I moved back home to Colorado, and I jumped right into open mics, and then I moved to Florida because there was more opportunities, and I could do a show every single month without dealing with snow. And I've been bouncing around ever since and calling Daytona home at the moment. So,
dude, what the fuck? You worked for Clive Barker is the reason you started stand-up.
Yep.
I guarantee you are the only person Clive Barker has ever said you should do stand-up comedy.
Yep, I think
that's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, I felt like out of place, but what I thanked him for is because how comedy clubs look for people with like movie credits and stuff.
Yeah, you already had that.
Yeah, before I left California, before I left Clive, he put my name in his movie, Nightbreed, the director's cut that came out in 2014. That was re-released like 25 years later.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so if you watch it, watch the end credits, and you'll see my name in it. Like it's the very last set of credits, and
oh my god, dude, I love horror so much. I'm a big horror fan, and I can't believe I'm talking to somebody who worked with Clive Barker.
Awesome.
that's really cool.
Thank you, Mike.
Such a cool. You know what's awesome is that is such a cool. Here's my first time doing stand-up story, and it was so much shorter than mine. like I think it's fun that the horror people suggested you do comedy, and I feel like there's a lot of comedy people who would recommend I do horror.
And it's such an easy line to cross back and forth because, like, with Evil Dead and Bruce Campbell and everything, it's just like it's so easy to just go from one end of the spectrum to the next and back and forth. It's just Shaun of the Dead and all that good stuff. It's you can do it. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
I was talking to Chris Santiago. He's in Chicago too, and I said, I'm done with the baton. You can have it, and you work in horror, and I can work in comedy, and so it was a pretty cool, like 3-hour conversation we had. It was a beautiful conversation.
Yeah, this is Chris Santiago, a photographer, right?
Yep.
That's him. He took the. I generally just absolutely hate having my photograph taken. But so there's this show here in Chicago, Comedians You Should Know. And they did these auditions, and it's everybody in the city wants to be on this show. Everybody. So it ends up being like 3 days where this bar is just jam-packed with comics, just asses to elbows with comics. And I reckon they hired Chris to, take some photographs. And there is he just took this just amazing photograph of me and my partner. And it just, I generally just hate being photographed, but this was just like, when I saw it, I was like, that was worth the moment of being like, oh, what was that?
I'm the same way. I'm like, I take all the photos of all the comics in Florida pretty much, but I just don't like having photos taken of me. But but I don't mind it. But it's just like, but they love all the photos that I've taken of because they put it on flyers and they get booked that way, and that means a lot to me. If I can help them in that sense, then
yeah.
But if they ask me not to take photos, I respect their decision and I don't take photos of them. So
yeah, and I would never say to somebody who is taking photos at a comedy show, like, don't take photographs of me. It's not like I think there's something wrong with them doing it. I don't know what it is though. If somebody, even if it's like, my romantic partner is like, let's take a selfie together, I'll do it. But like right as they're taking the picture, I get like this weird anxiety about it. I guess I think the picture is gonna, create some sort of second version of me, and Clive Barker's gonna read about it in the newspaper and call you up and be like, "Hey, let's make this movie."
Most definitely. But yeah, he was my hero growing up, and just to be in his presence was a beautiful thing, and for him to teach me everything that I've known and still use to this day is just fantastic. So.
Yeah, Clive Barker's shit scared the fuck out of me.
Yeah.
The can and some of it is so much more interesting, I think, than people realize. Like, because it was Candyman you mentioned about, right? Like, Candyman is. Forgive me if I'm getting us too far off topic. I didn't know how.
It's all good, Mike.
Focused we wanted to be, but. Candyman is just such an interesting film in terms of, like, I'm sure there's some things in there that are racially problematic. But I also remember, like, when I was a little kid watching it, I remember being terrified. But I also remember being like, oh, I see. There's a history of racism, and it's actually, the film is showing that it's continuing to play it out in the form of this place called Cabrini Green, and the consequences for that racism tend to continue to land on the shoulders of people of color. I was like, even as a little kid, I pieced that together in between going, because that actor was terrifying and everything.
Indeed, most definitely.
I apologize. You got me talking about horror.
No worries. And Mike, what was it feeling like when you first performed stand-up?
My very first set, excuse me, I actually felt pretty okay throughout the whole thing. I knew that I wasn't, crushing, but I got to this one, only had like an hour to like prep for it, and I had told the host not to tell people it was my first time because I didn't want that like weirdness. And sorry, maybe the reason I can see this video of myself and there's like so the I told the host like don't tell anybody that it's my first time, because I really didn't want to get like pity laughs or have training wheels on up there. I really wanted to go like all the way in, and for the most part no one cared what I was saying, like but then I got to my punchline, which I think there were maybe 2-3 punchlines in that whole hunk of material. But when I got to like the punchline that I was most excited about, seeing that work, and it made me feel very understood, in a way that like I hadn't really before. I'd done other sort of creative stuff. My bachelor's is in lit with a creative writing minor, so I've read plenty of poetry to folks, and I used to write a lot of songs. I still do, but I could never perform them very well. But that one joke hitting, I realized like, okay, so I'm being understood. Like this audience is understanding me. So within this format, it's not like writing a song where you can't fully be yourself inside a song, because you got to create context. With stand-up, you can create whatever context you have to. So that's the thing that I realized, and that's when I realized like, oh, I can be understood from this platform as long as I'm being honest and authentic. Things won't. It's kind of like the opposite of the fear that the fear that comics have about like their stuff on stage being misinterpreted.
Yep. I do. Yep.
Yeah, so like I have that fear in like phone calls to my parents. Like, when I'm checking out at the grocery store. But I didn't feel that fear when I was on that stage at all. Because I just knew like they're with me. They're listening to me. There's an expectation. I owe them something, which is I owe them a punchline. And I owe them a good punchline, and I owe them honesty and sincerity. But we have this agreement, and in that agreement, I get to create whatever context I need to be able to show them who I am, and then allow them to derive some joy from who I am. And then I realized like, well, I can do more than just that. It was very, very exciting, because I felt understood for, I think, not a lot of times. And I'm a socialist from the deep South. There weren't a lot of times where I felt understood. So, that in spite of everyone's best efforts, so that was pretty fucking cool for me.
Indeed, most definitely. And what are your favorite comedy specials and comedy record albums?
Oh, I think certainly Pryor's Sunset Strip. Certainly a lot of the George Carlin stuff, and even before the 90s when he got, when he went really heavy into the social and political commentary. I can't remember the name of the album, but he's got this great bit about losing things, and how your home is just a place for your stuff. A lot of Bill Hicks. I really love Bill Hicks's work. I made my dad laugh recently with a Bill Hicks joke. I just repeated a Bill Hicks joke from the early 90s on the phone to my father in 2021, and he laughed. And so that's very powerful. I really love Bill Burr. I think Bill Burr is just there's a lot of things that he's said, especially on his weird podcast where he just talks to himself, that I don't necessarily agree with, but I think he's one of those rare artists that will show everybody like the most honest iteration of themselves. And even if that's a little bit ugly, the cool thing is like we get to watch him clean it up. So like if you compare some of the things he said about women 5 years ago to the things he said about feminism in Paper Tiger, that's a very big difference. So Bill Burr, Jen Kirkman, I think is absolutely brilliant. Lori Kilmartin, who I got to do that particular show with, that was a really cool moment for me because I really dig her work as well. So yeah, and Mark Maron. And I feel like a lot of people think that's stupid, but really fucking love Mark Maron.
Indeed, and some of those guys have been on, and ladies have been on TV and film, and I want to know what your favorite sitcom, sketch shows, and comedy films are.
Okay. So favorite, this is tough. Sorry, my brain's trying to categorize each of them. Film, TV shows, sketch shows. I'll be honest, I don't take in a whole lot of comedy from television. I don't actually find myself watching a lot of TV. And that's not because I like, TV's stupid, I don't want to own a TV. It's I don't have time. But I think, I really, it's one of the funnier, I really like to watch, I'll jump on YouTube a good bit and watch Last Week Tonight. But I know this isn't a sitcom. I think 30 Rock was a really great sitcom. Problematic as it might seem now, Blackish is really, really, I think, very fucking good. I think that's one of the better ones that's come out in the last few years. It's the writing is just punchy enough, but all of the characters seem very human. Yet they're still able to maintain this kind of sitcom-y gloss to the whole thing. I think that's a really, really great show. I kind of want to make it a point to watch more of that show now because it's really fucking good.
Indeed. And comedy films?
That's a good one. I think, sorry, I know it seems like this would be easy for a stand-up to narrow down. There was one that I watched. Damn it, I'm blanking on what the thing that I watched recently was, and my brain is hyper-focusing on that one film, and now I can't remember what it goddamn was. I know I don't like The Hangover. But I can't remember what the name of this thing I watched recently was, and damn it, I'm getting upset about it. Might be better to circle back.
Indeed, most definitely. And if you can go on tour with any comedian, locally and internationally known, which comedians would you like to go on tour with?
Oh, there are some friends that I would love. Now, going on tour as in someone to hang with, or going on tour as in, hey, this person is, you know, somebody who like you look up to a lot and whatnot?
Both.
Both. So there's some local comics who are kind of, you know, my peers that I think it'd be really cool to just jump into a van with them as if we were a bunch of 19-year-olds who just started a band. My friend Tristan Smith, Adam Quaslow, you know, so some of those folks, just really brilliant comics and really good people. My friend Corey Wood, he's in Texas now, but yeah, I think that as far as, you know, a comic that I'd like to just follow around and get to see work, who I don't know, but my God, if this person ever did a tour, I would love to see to be a part of it, and, you know, just to be able to like do a 5-minute opener and then get to watch them work, you know, watch how this person works an album. I would say actually Jen Kirkman. I just think her work ends up, you know, by the time she does a special, it's all so, either her or Bill Burr, by the time either of them do a special, it's all so perfectly tight and just everything nailed down, craftsman-like and wonderfully.
Indeed, most definitely. And oh, if you can get roasted by 5 comedians, past and present, which comedians would you like to get roasted by?
Oh, definitely Carlin and Pryor. I think if Letterman said anything mean to me, I would really enjoy it. Certainly Don Rickles. And, you know, I'm gonna go ahead and say I would like it if Joan Rivers could roast me. I think that'd be cool, because she was really cool for, you know, for what she did and where she was.
Most definitely.
I don't like Bill Hicks to roast me. That would just be fucking brutal. There's a reason people like the ones that do more of like the social and political commentary, which is what I'm generally most interested in. I feel like those aren't people you want roasting you, right? Like a Bill Hicks roast would be like you're buying into the corporate system, and you know.
Indeed. And where do you see your comedy journey in the next 5 years?
So I want to do a tour. I'm also. This is something I can't. I have to do it, but I'm also, I have to do it because I'm scared of it. But sometime in the next couple of years, I want to put together an album. I don't know if it's going to be half hour, 45 minutes, or an hour. Don't know what it's going to be called. But I do know, like, I have a certain amount of material that is up to my standard. Of course, that standard might change between now and then, but I definitely want to do that. And really, for me, the joy of stand-up is, yeah, that being understood and getting the laugh is great, but that's also a weirdly temporary experience. So really, for me, the joy in stand-up is just constantly working material, just really constantly working material. And if I could say anything, I'd say I want to do some road work. I want to record an album, learn how to monetize this thing a little bit, because I'm getting older. I don't want to be 55 performing for free 6 nights a week while, you know, still working 40 hours a week at a day job. But I really, you know, I want to get some road behind me and some road in front of me, and do some touring and record an album. I think those are the two big things in the next couple of years. 5 years, who knows? I don't think that far ahead.
Indeed. And which other forms of comedy would you like to venture off into, like improv, sketch, comedy writing, acting, directing, etc.?
You know, this is something that I'm a bit ashamed of, but I haven't done anything other than stand up, comedy wise. At stand up and kind of riffing on community radio shows and podcasts. But I think I actually want to learn a little bit about acting. After I'm going to take some acting classes after this pandemic. And I think some of it is just, I don't have a face for acting. I don't have it'd be real hard to put me next to any of these folks. That's one thing with these virtual shows. If you're doing it with someone with TV credits, their face is fucking right next to yours on the screen, and it's really, really rough. But I think just because I've never done it, and I've never really done anything like acting. I don't think stand-up is like acting because I'm being myself up there. I can, I'm completely in control. When you're acting, your character is in control, but you have no control whatsoever. And I think that would be a very interesting experience for me creatively, to see what that feels like, and whether or not I have any aptitude for it. In part because I know for sure, like it would be something creative that I wouldn't pressure myself on too much, because I do put a lot of pressure on myself to like make the best possible overall, work as a comic. So being able to do something where I feel like if I say sketch or improv, I'll be like, well, those are things I'm going to beat the shit out of myself and be like, I got to get better at I know better than this. I know this isn't funny and this isn't as funny. This tag would have really, but I think if something like sketch, I could, or something like acting, I could really just go, okay, well, I suck at this, but it'll be fun learning.
Indeed. And what is your favorite joke a comic has written?
What's that? Sorry, you broke up a little bit on my end.
What's your favorite joke a comic has written?
Oh, gosh. This is one of those. I feel like all my answers are really long, but your questions aren't helping that. So I think the Bill Hicks joke that I used to make my dad laugh the other night was the joke about Christians wearing a cross. Like, you think if Jesus comes back, he ever wants to see a cross. There were a few others that he did. I think his joke about the Kennedy assassination, though, is probably my number one favorite joke. He does a lot of stuff about the Kennedy assassination, but he talked about, it was, I think, when Clinton first got elected, he talked about how, like, you'll go into this dark, smoky room when you get elected president, and the 12 people who got you elected are in there, and they're reptiles, because this is a Bill Hicks bit, so they have to be, lizard people. And they're smoking cigars, and they say, roll the film, and they show you a video of the Kennedy assassination from an angle you've never seen before. And it's just a really brilliant way of saying, like, hey, this, not that it doesn't matter who the president is. I don't subscribe to that belief, but I think Bill Hicks did. And just it's just such an amazing punchline. The buildup is so wonderful. And then the punchline being that, like, these are the people that killed Kennedy, and showing that in a very interesting way. It's just really wonderful. George Carlin's hunk of material about losing stuff, and I think that's really great. My favorite overall bit, like hunk of material, is probably Carlin's. I think it's called Coast to Coast Emergency. Are you familiar with that?
Nope, but I heard a lot of his material, but that one's spacing my mind at the moment.
Yeah, it got re-released actually in the past few years because the initial bit was called "I Kind of Like It When a Lot of People Die," but then 9/11 happened, so he didn't want to do it right then. But it transformed a couple of years later into this Coast to Coast Emergency bit that's on one of his albums, and it's just so great. It's kind of long form. It's about 5 minutes of material. There's one, he talks about how he wants every disaster to get worse and worse. And then he, creates an example disaster. And then he just continues to escalate it until the fabric of space and time has been destroyed and people who are dead are coming back to life. And it's just really absurdist and just wonderful. So I think that's, possibly my favorite bit.
Awesome. And what experience would you like your audience with him after a set is over?
What experience would I like the audience to have had after the set is over?
Yep.
Giving me money. That's the experience I'd like them to have. No, I think so I'm kind of a prick on stage. And on Facebook, I felt very badly for you because you didn't know me. Just for anybody listening, just some context. Sureth didn't know me. I was recommended to him for this podcast, and I think we became Facebook friends so we could connect for it. And then my Facebook just went ape shit. I just lost my shit on there repeatedly, as if I was on stage, although I was not. But I think, I want people to laugh in the moment. I want people to sitting there when they hear that joke, I want them to laugh. And not just that time when they hear that joke. I want them to laugh when they've heard that joke 10, 15, 20 times. That's why I have such a high standard. But I for a lot of the sort of material I do, I also want that moment where they go, fair enough, because there will be someone in the audience who disagrees with with the socialist from Alabama. That's gonna happen. Excuse me. Sorry. That's gonna happen. And while I want to make sure that person is laughing, I also want to make sure that that person is laughing for the right reason. I think sometimes you'll get people to laugh at themselves, but it'll be for the wrong reason. So like if someone roasts me and says, and the premise of the roast is that, hey, Mike has some like anger issues, I might be like, yeah, fair, yes. But if they roast me and the roast is, it's funny, they're like, Mike has anger issues. But if that same roast also demonstrates to me the consequences of that, then that would make me go, oh, I should work on that too. So I think, I want people to laugh when they get there, but I want them to remember the joke and to realize that for some of the folks, for the more privileged folks in the audience, that they're kind of the butt of that joke. They're laughing at it, yes, and I'm glad they're laughing at it. I don't hate them as an individual, but they just keep getting Apple to come out with new iPhones, and it doesn't make any sense. And I need that to stop.
Indeed. And circling back to your favorite comedy films, do you have any that come to mind?
So I think for me, probably my favorites are actually much older. Not a lot of recent favorites. I think, a lot of these comedy films in the 80s, while they were deeply problematic, So I guess I'm going to give you a favorite era. The Billy Crystal, Tom Hanks kind of era, Bill Murray era as well. There's a lot of problematic things that happen inside of those films, but they're so fucking good. Like Groundhog Day is hilarious. It also sends the message that you should, connive and plot and plan in order to gain a woman's love and affection. But it is also hilarious. And I think that there have been some things. I'm not one of those like PC culture's ruining comedy. Certainly not. I'm pro PC culture, but I'm against dishonesty, and I think in those times there was for mainstream stuff there was a lot more opportunity to just kind of be honest, but also to make a mistake and to have people come in and say, hey, this is fucked up, and then the conversation becomes, no, this shit's fucked up. I think that if you look at a lot of stuff that's coming out now in 2050, which is kind of the equivalent, 2040, people won't be saying that's problematic. People will be saying they're lying. They're not being honest about who they are. So yeah, I think I kind of really love that era because there was a sense that, like not what happened in Revenge of the Nerds. That was a little too problematic, but some of the kind of weird behaviors that were acceptable then but aren't now, and getting to explore, those movies are fucking funny. Bill Murray's a funny son of a bitch in Groundhog Day and Ghostbusters, but getting to watch those mistakes also happen is really cool, I think, because there's a lot you can learn from it. So that was a very long answer.
It's fine. It's fine. And
most white guys, I have a lot of words for. I like Bill Murray.
Indeed, I loved him in Coffee and Cigarettes with the Wu-Tang, with Jiz and RZA from the Wu-Tang Clan. That's one of my favorite things he's done. And what did you pick My Hood, My Block, My City to raise funds for with this episode?
Oh, they do so much great stuff in the city of Chicago. I'm actually, if you'll allow me, I'd like to maybe pull up an About Us just so I'm getting this right. They do a lot of great stuff. Give me one moment, if it's okay. I'd like to actually pull up their mission statement and read it verbatim, or a portion of it verbatim. They provide underprivileged youth with an awareness of the world and opportunities beyond their neighborhood. Take students on explorations focused on STEM, arts and culture, citizenry and volunteerism, health, community development, culinary arts, and entrepreneurism. Their core values are interconnectivity, empathy, hope, and civic responsibility. And there's a little bit more information there, but so this is an organization that has a big impact on the city of Chicago, in some of the parts of the town that, we were talking about it earlier. Clive Barker, Candyman, Cabrini Green. This is an organization that is doing a lot of things to mitigate some of the impacts of the extreme institutionalized racism that is here in Chicago. I want to be careful here because I feel like bumming people out won't make them donate. But Chicago is unfortunately a very segregated town, and there's the way that I, as a white person, am treated in Chicago versus the way a black person in Chicago is treated by the larger community and by the city, basically by city government. It's a huge fucking gap, and it's not it's above average in America. I'm really sure of it. It's above average for what we have in the rest of the country. So, this is an organization that is doing some things to build folks up in underprivileged areas and to mitigate some of the damage that leadership in Chicago has done, and that white folks in Chicago have done to people of color and other marginalized folks in Chicago. And that's, yeah. So please, 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 please give some money to them. If you are listening, don't give them money. Giving them money is more important to me than getting a follower. Because I own Instagram, because I don't take very good pictures.
Indeed. And Mike, you were nominated to be my guest, and the stand-up speakeasy is like the Roaring Twenties, the Prohibition, the secret society of stand-up comics, if you will. And with that being said, which comics in Chicago would you like to see on a future episode of the stand-up speakeasy?
Sure. So, and you do want it to be a Chicago comic?
Yep.
Okay. I'm going to do something that generally is against my rules, which is I'm actually going to suggest my partner, Katie Zane. Katie, when you reach out to Katie, just know Katie's pronouns are they and them. But they're just, and I try to avoid any inside baseball stuff. But first of all, they can answer your questions much more succinctly than me. But they're also one of the few Chicago comics that have remained active throughout the pandemic, and I have a lot of respect for their work ethic. And they're really working on making some pretty great stuff. And we do have a rule about recommending one another for shows or opportunities, but I think in this case, I just kind of want to break that rule one time because they are. I think you'll be very interested in a lot of their answers, and frankly, they can answer without without taking 15 minutes per answer like I done you. But they're really really busting their ass to do really great work right now, and I don't think I'd be as good as I am right now without them kind of showing me this is somebody that just watching their development has been astonishing. And maybe it's because I'm so close to it, because they're developing in the next room. So I'm hearing every set that they do and able to, to notice the development. But I really think that they are developing really great.
Indeed. Most definitely. I'll reach out to Katie for sure. And so please follow, even though Mike's not a good photographer, follow him on Instagram and Twitter and donate to my hood, my block, my city. And Mike, are there any final words you'd like to give out to the audience at home?
Just if you feel up to giving me a follow, I will be promoting some shows via Twitter and Instagram if I can figure it out. I think I'm getting to the point where I need one of the young people to teach me about Instagram, but but come to a show, and please, for the love of God, give some money to My Hood, My Block, My City. They're doing such great work in the Chicago area, and it just that will be money very well utilized by our society.
Indeed, most definitely. And for Mike and myself, and for the Stand Up Speakeasy, thank you all for joining us this evening, and thank you for watching in the future. And my name is Seth Nade, and we'll see you next time on the Stand Up Speakeasy. Be well, everyone.